I'm making some roasted squash here. The first thing you want to do is go ahead and put your oven at 400 degrees to preheat. I've got a nicely washed squash. I always just take my dish rag and wipe over the outside of my squash and any melons so that you keep them nice and clean. I always put a little bleach in my dishwater. I hope you do too. I'm using one of my biggest knives, and y'all, it was a struggle. This squash was a little bit small, so it was a little bit tough. But as you can see, I then started scooping out all of the seeds, all of the mush, for the lack of a better word, in the inside. Get those guts out, kind of like a pumpkin. Clean all of that good stuff out. And you're preparing the squash for roasting. Notice I have this ready to go on a sheet pan. I'll be roasting my squash on a sheet pan. Next thing we want to do is, just as part of the preparation, you're going to take some salt. Any salt will do. I'm using Himalayan pink salt. And I'm just going to do a quick grind over the top, the flesh of the spaghetti squash. And this will draw out the excess moisture so that I really get some good strands on my spaghetti squash. I'm going to allow this to sit anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes. The longer you let it sit, the more water that you'll be able to draw out from the squash. It's really an important step in the roasting process. Again, I'm using Himalayan pink salt. You can, any salt will do. Table salt will do as well. Notice after about 5 or 10 minutes, this is the moisture that is drawn out. The longer you let it sit, the more moisture, the more water you'll draw out from the squash. And I'm just using a paper towel to draw up that moisture that has been pulled out of the squash, out of the flesh of the squash. Next, you want to take some extra virgin olive oil and just rub that over the flesh of the squash. I'm putting on a glove so that I don't get my hands too nasty. And just make love to that squash. Go ahead and rub it, grease it up. This will ensure that your squash does in fact roast nicely and get some brown color without burning. I only put olive oil on the flesh of my squash. You can put it on the skin of the squash if you want, but I just put some on the flesh of the squash, and I'm going to be roasting these flesh down on the baking pan. Remember, we're putting that into a hot 400-degree oven that has been preheated. And after 40 minutes, you'll be able to just flake that flesh out, and it literally should come out like spaghetti noodles, stringy, just like noodles. And that's how you know it's done. If it's not doing that, when you fork it, then just pop it right back into the oven and cook for an additional 5 minutes at a time until it's ready to go. My squash came out perfect. Notice that I'm able to get all of the flesh out of the squash. Go ahead and store your squash in a covered bowl. I'm adding my squash, eating it with some spaghetti sauce. Hope you enjoyed. Before we go, I want to compare the numbers. Cooked spaghetti has a whopping 230 calories and 43 grams of carbs in 1 cup of cooked spaghetti. On the contrary, 1 cup of cooked squash has only 31 calories and just 7 carbs. Yeah, I'm betting on the cooked spaghetti squash.